Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I'm delighted to be joined in this episode by Ben Gilbert. Ben is the founder of a New York media company called All Caps. He's previously a digital journalist for the likes of Business Insider, and now he specialises in ghostwriting, PR, and event promotion for the New York cannabis market. Ben, how are you keeping today, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's a little rainy, a little dreary here, and I think that means fall has officially started in New York. Maybe it'll go back to being hot, but I've been better on the weather. Everything else is going great. How about yourself?
Yeah, we got the same over here. It seems to be when everybody goes back to school, the rain starts to fall out of the heavens over here. So we're having one of those days as well. So I'm delighted you could join us on this episode. We're like trying to help inform everybody about all things New York as much as we can, of which you know a good deal. Can you maybe give everybody a quick overview of how you came from Business Insider to setting up All Caps?
Absolutely, yeah. I spent the last 13 years or so in New York media. I worked for, believe it or not, AOL for many years for a website named Engadget, a tech website, and prior to that, I worked for a video game publication, and then eventually Business Insider. I was at for the last 7 or so years, and decided approximately across the last year, while doing a little coverage of the cannabis market here, and legalization happened here in March of 2021. So ever since then, really, I mean, to be totally frank, going way back, I've been a cannabis user for 20 plus years, daily user. I've been a big fan of using cannabis as a part of vacation, where like I go to California, I go to Amsterdam or whatever. Like I have a lot of love for the culture of cannabis personally. And so I was watching it a little bit as a journalist, covering a little bit as a journalist. I covered cookies a little bit. I covered some of the local growers in New York, and it really just seemed like a great moment to jump in. Like if there was ever going to be a moment that I was going to switch careers from journalism into something else that I was really passionate about, this was the moment. So that's really been the driving force for me. I stopped working as a journalist in June. I started my company in mid-July, and we launched the New York Growers Cup soon afterwards, me and a couple of local growers in late July. So it's really been, out of the frying pan into the fryer.
Happy days, yeah. Long time consumer and use it myself. As I said, I love the part that you use to go on holidays. That's one of the things. I was over in New York in June, and I went over with my wife and another couple friend, and we couldn't believe it. Me and my buddy were like seeing weed trucks everywhere, and we were like a kid in candy store. I know that's been taken away because of the parking fines and the different policy unions that happen in Manhattan to be able to take care of business. But I can't wait until the days now I go back over there towards the end of the year, start of next year, and there's real proper dispensaries that I can go in and get a full-scale consumer experience.
For sure, sure. I would say even right now, there are a lot of dispensaries operating in the gray market. It's called the gray market. To be totally honest, it's frankly like illegal. So it's not necessarily the gray market. It's definitely just straight up illegal. That said, there's levels of discretion. There's some places that are just operating as storefronts, that are straight up operating a dispensary like you would see in a legal state. And then there's some places that are operating like social clubs or consumption lounges where they also have a dispensary within them. And those are a little bit more discreet a lot of times. And so there's really like I think that it's referred to often as the gray market here right now, because there's some level of the state looking the other way, the city looking the other way. You mentioned briefly that some of the trucks had been towed, had been fined, were receiving parking fines. There was another number of trucks that were fined for having edible sales, so they were fined for essentially selling like food without a license. And so that did happen. There's been some enforcement measures on that, but the city is still rife with trucks and people literally setting up tables and selling it off of tables on the street. So not a problem. If you want to visit New York City, there's still plenty of options for you.
Yeah, we learned from my 420 jurist the difference between a license and a permit when it comes to New York is a big difference between keeping your business and not. Let's jump on to the first topic that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, and it's the legacy market in New York. Now, I have a couple of questions. One, is there a good legacy market product in New York that's going to be able to survive legalization? And two, do you see, let's say, brand names that used to be big in the legacy market in New York coming back to the fore now? Because like with Nike, Adidas, McDonald's, the brand name is what the consumer generally will move towards.
Definitely. It's New York is a very particular place. And I'm speaking specifically in New York City, of course. New York is a very large state. There's a very different market upstate than there is downstate. New York City, though, has traditionally been a distributor market. So cannabis comes in from other states and it gets sold here, usually at a markup, largely from California. And that's still the case for the most part. There's still a ton of California product here that's being sold, and a lot of brand loyalty from the most hardcore, the biggest weed nerds in New York City. There's still a lot of loyalty to large California brands, right? You still see a lot of that stuff, and a lot of that being sold and used for cloud online and whatever. That said, in terms of legacy growers in New York, there's certainly a number of those, and they are just now having a chance to really rise to the forefront. And they're in varying levels of readiness for the legalization when they are able to apply for cultivation licenses and stuff. Just because New York legalized in March 2021 does not mean that a lot of the licenses are available yet, as you mentioned. So if you're a cultivator in New York State, if you've been growing as part of the legacy market indoors, there's no real way to legally apply for a cultivation license yet because the state hasn't started that process yet. So there are a number of people, though, who are longtime cultivators who are part of the legacy market, some of which I'm working with on the New York Growers Cup, who are really, really ready, who have investors, who have blueprints, who have facilities that they are in the process of starting leases on, and really ready to go and ready to jump into the legal market in a legit way the moment that they are able to. So I definitely see a lot of opportunity especially for growers here. It's a lot harder, though, if your business is being a delivery service for the last 20 years and your product is largely based on California brands. It is still illegal for you as a company to bring cannabis from one state to another in the United States. And so it's hard to know what the legal path is forward for a big distributor in New York. And that's certainly some of the biggest brands in New York are distributors. So
yeah. One of the things I'm looking forward to most in New York that we talked to other guests is that the melting pot of cultures over there and ideas in New York is like getting nowhere else in the world as far as I'm concerned. And as he said, I'm sure there has to be some guy who's been growing weed in Brooklyn or something for the last 15 years. That's like the greatest weed in the state and hasn't been able to expand that into a business until now. Do you see a scenario with they're going to use, let's say, ECS and HVAC systems and it's all indoor, or is it going to be greenhouse? Because obviously the climate doesn't allow for more than one or two cultivations, I'm sure, during the summer in New York.
Yeah, there's been some. So the first licenses that were given out in New York were all for outdoor growers. They were hemp farmers that were allowed to essentially have like a turnkey solution where they turned their farm directly into a cannabis farm from a hemp farm. Because the hemp market had the bottom fell out for the most part on prices. So part of the New York State's process of legalizing cannabis has been to enable these outdoor growers to convert. And as you say, the climate here is difficult. It's humid, it's mercurial. Right now it's raining and very humid. Yesterday it was 95 degrees. 3 days ago, it was 75 degrees. It's very tough if you're a grower and you're growing outdoors here. Humidity is a notoriously huge problem with cannabis growth as well, where mold becomes a real problem if you're dealing with high levels of humidity on an ongoing basis. So I would predict that the biggest cultivators in New York State will eventually be indoor grows just because they're able to produce all year. That's really critical for the market, is being able to produce. I mean, in February in New York, there's nowhere you're growing anything, whether you're talking about tomatoes or cannabis. So you really need to have a facility that's indoors that enables you to work year round if you want to continue to satisfy the market in the way that the market demands. So yeah, I mean, in the long term, I think that we'll have some outdoor growers. There'll be some seasonal outdoor growers. There's a lot of benefits to growing outdoors. All plants are outdoor plants. There's no such thing as an outdoor plant. So it's certainly not a bad thing to want to prioritize outdoor growing. It's just that, yeah, New York is a pretty terrible climate for growing a lot of cannabis. So I think in the long term, we'll definitely see more indoor. But it's going to be a minute before those places come online because the licensing, again, it just hasn't started yet for indoor cultivation.
Yeah, I think the cannabis tourist is going to be a big, huge market in New York City anyway. Obviously, we know the state is so big, and I think that consumer is going to want a specific looking and smelling type of flower, which is pretty much going to be indoor because you can monitor pest control and so many other different variables. So, tell me this: is there a strain in New York that's individual? Well, obviously there must be, that's individual to New York that you haven't seen anywhere else in America. And if so, is it on a par with the stuff that you see in California? Because over in Europe, you hear California weed is the best. You very rarely hear Colorado being mentioned at all. It seems to be California have gotten the marketing campaign out done properly.
All respect to California. California has some tremendous weed growers, some tremendous weed. Huge shout outs to Doja Exclusive. They do some incredible stuff with the folks at Wizard Trees, Deep East. Like, I have a ton of respect for the cultivation world in California. Some of the biggest breeders, the foundation of the current cannabis market, the people who create the genetics that become the hot strains, a lot of those are in California. So I want to start with a lot of respect for California, but also it's really important that we understand that a lot of cannabis taste is regional. So there's, for instance, in LA, there's a lot of OG being smoked. There's a ton of that's like thought of as a Southern California strain, right? And in New York, you see a lot of different strains. Like Piff is a huge name here. Sours are a big thing here. Some really like specific New York strains that we think of are New York Sour Diesel. We think of Cuban Black Haze, which is Piff. Hazes generally are very popular in the Northeast and in New York. It would be a misnomer to say that literally any of these strains are from California, are from New York, are from any of these places, because truly cannabis is it's not native to the United States. It's all of these are derivatives of land races from much different places in the world that have very different climates. So the current strains that we think of are really these like manufactured designer strains. And so in terms of ones that we associate with New York, though, like New York City Sour Diesel is certainly one of the like classic New York strains that we think of. And Piff is definitely another huge one. And we're seeing this amazing resurgence in those recently. If I can just very briefly give a shout out to the folks at Piff Coast Farms, they have some incredibly good Piff that they've been growing. They've been creating new strains. And there's really been some amazing stuff coming out of the folks at the Collector Stash. They have some really great GMO. They have some really great chem dogs, some strains that are like thought of traditionally as associated with the Northeast. And that regionality it's really great to see those folks standing up and representing the strains that we love here versus just seeing, more gelato or more of the strains that are delicious and wonderful, but are truly California strains.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm intrigued. So when are you hosting your growers competition? Is this going to be an annual thing? Is it going to be like the Emerald Cup, or how are you formatting the whole competition?
Definitely. I would love to tell you it's going to be an annual thing. I don't want to ever get ahead of myself. Ideally, it will be. This is certainly the first annual New York Growers Cup, and we've seen a lot of success so far. So I'm confident that we'll have a second year and a third year and so on and so forth. I don't want to necessarily directly compare it to something like the Emerald Cup or many of the other excellent cannabis competitions that happen all over America and the world. The New York Growers Cup is really intended to highlight New York growers. And so it's a competition specifically among New York growers, rather than a lot of competitions you see allowing anybody to enter from all over the United States or even all over the world. And that's wonderful. But given that we are currently in the very beginnings of the New York market, the New York Growers Cup is intended to be like a foundational event. A means of highlighting the best growers here and connecting them directly to capital, directly to business opportunities, and enabling major companies that want to enter the New York market to connect with New York's best growers. Because currently the way that the laws operate in the US in terms of legalization is if you want to sell weed in New York state legally, you have to grow that weed here. And so if you're a big company, if you're Cookies or you're the Jungle Boys or any other of these big California brands that we love, if they want to really enter the New York market, they need New Yorkers to do that. And so this is a means of connecting companies like that with New York's best growers.
Incredible. Yeah, it's amazing to see. I wish you all the best with everything in the future. Last thing before we go, we've had a couple of comments actually in previous episodes. If somebody wanted to get into working in the cannabis industry in New York, is there specific sites where they can view jobs and they can peruse more details of what positions might be available?
I think there probably are. There's almost certainly a website or a connection board for that kind of thing. I would not do that, the way that I entered the cannabis market in New York, the way that I entered the journalism market in New York is by starting. Just start doing the thing you want to be doing and do that as fast as possible. The only difference between a journalist and a civilian is doing journalism, and the only difference between being a part of the cannabis industry and not is participating. If you want to be a grower, you should start learning how to grow. If you want to be a distributor, you should start talking to distributors and figure out how to work with them. If you want to process hash, you should go work with hash processors and figure out how to do that. But the very baseline, I would say, without having to invest a lot of money, without having to take a bunch of classes or whatever, is get on social media, especially Instagram. The cannabis media is largely, the cannabis world, excuse me, is largely on Instagram, and reach out to people. I know a lot of very small growers who have huge connections just because they were passionate and they reached out on Instagram, they reached out through social media, and they got in touch. And, you know, your passion comes through. Your passion means a lot in any industry. And it's especially so, I think, in cannabis, where so much of the industry is driven by people who are genuinely passionate about the plant, passionate about creating this industry from the ground up. So I think that, yeah, I would start with Instagram. I would start with YouTube, look for growers on YouTube, look for the people who are doing stuff there, and just get involved with the community as much as possible. Go to events, talk to people, and try to get out there.
Amazing. Great advice. For anybody who wants to check out more, this is allcaps.com. Highly recommend checking out Ben's work. Ben, hopefully we get to have a smoke in person in New York over the next 12 months at some stage. But thank you very much for taking your time to do this.
Of course. Thank you so much. I would welcome you. I hope I can get you to Brooklyn and get some great pizza.
I look forward to it, mate. Until the next episode, everybody.